Hello, everyone. Welcome back to week three of the Chosen and Cherished Club. It's good to see you all. Sorry, I'm just getting started a couple minutes late. We're in the middle of a rainstorm and it's so dark, so I just set up a couple extra lights so that I was visible here on camera. But um, yeah, so we're going to get started very shortly. We'll just let a couple more people trickle in. Uh, Guys, we're on week three, eh? So we're like halfway through the program. I would love to hear from you guys. How's everyone doing? Like, is it moving too quickly? Do you feel like you're caught up? Is it manageable, digestible? Can you guys handle the videos and then the exercises? How's that been going for you guys? Thumbs up. Perfect.
You just say week two homework is so intense, I've not yet made it to week three.
Yeah, I see that. So week two homework being intense, was that like emotionally intense, or was that more volume, number of questions intense? I'd love to know. We are going slow. We have young kids. Amazing. Um, Perfect. Yeah, honestly, the it is a lot. Like when I work with couples all the time, I have to remind them that to give me 2 hours of your life a week, because that's really what that's the bare minimum. I mean, if you just watch the video and you came to the call, that's 2 hours to even do the home exercise. You're probably looking at like 3 hours a week. Um, the reality is that is a lot of time to dedicate, which is why I also say, like, why is the program 5 weeks? It's 5 weeks because I also know people don't have the bandwidth for months and months and months of doing this work. Like you definitely don't have anyone that you can give 3 hours to of your week for the next, year. That's way too much. Why I like the intensive format is I don't think we can learn everything that we need to learn in an hour, let alone 10 hours, let alone in 20 hours. So it's in my mind, it's really good to just kind of go through these bursts, intensive spurt or growth phases where we can get a lot, we can absorb a lot, and then synthesize it and then go out and practice it in the real world. Like the stuff that I'm teaching, I mean, if you get 50% in, if it changes one interaction, one behavior in your relationship, then I mean that's huge in and of itself. It's worth the time invested. Um, so I'm glad that everyone's kind of, trucking along and keeping up where you're able to keep up. You guys also know that you've got access to the videos forever, so you can always go back and watch them. So that's great. Those home exercises, the way really, if you guys notice, all of them are how do I questions. How can we, what would we be doing? They're all curiosity-based questions. You'll notice if you go through the material, you're gonna ask questions. Like, why do you feel this way? Why is our relationship not working? There's a reason for that, is because the why is largely unknowable, right? Why I married my wife, I could tell you today, but I'd give you a different answer than on the day that we got married, right? So the why changes. So it's largely unreliable and unpredictable. So if you know anything about science, it's just not valid. It's not reliable. So I don't really focus on the why, because why changes based on how we're also feeling today. You're going to make sense of your relationship based on the current, emotional state that you're in, as well your future prognosis of what you expect your relationship to look like a year from now is going to be largely based on that feeling you have about your relationship, how you make sense of your relationship today. So I always say I don't try to make sense of things. I prefer to ask for what could I be doing differently? How could I listen to you? How could I show up better? Those are the interesting WH questions as opposed to the why. Um, so yeah, on that note, we've got someone is just saying that the pace is good. Week two is intense for us too. Week three is great. We're seeing progress. Wow, I'm so happy to hear that. I love hearing you guys make progress. And on that note, so today I'm going to be teaching you we're going to be touching on that scaling portion of your relationship, that scaling exercise. I could run therapy with couples just with that simple exercise. And so we're going to dive into that because it's super powerful, not only making sense of the past, but also making sense of the future. So we're going to go over those past-oriented questions, the present-oriented questions, and those future-oriented questions about scaling our relationship. And it ties heavily into week one. So like week one is what you want in your relationship. That's the other set of questions that I could just run therapy. Like I literally give me 3 questions on either side. I could do a year of therapy with a couple just based on those questions. Week one was, what do you want? Second question was, will you know you get what you want? Third question is, what difference will it make in your life when you have it? I could do therapy just with that. The third or the second set of questions, the 3 questions are based on that scaling exercise of what we did this week. So we're going to dive into that. You guys were also given a language shift, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the importance of language in your relationships. So you guys remember in week 3, I introduced the idea of not speaking of really this binary world in which we live in of it's either this or it's that, and moving into a place of and both, right? So we really want to, extract ourselves from this binary thinking and really move towards and both. And I'm just looking up, does any of you guys know Oscar Wilde? I had never heard of the man until I married a woman who had 2 degrees in theater. Anyway, he's a playwright, famous playwright, and probably my famous play, Sweetheart. What was the name of that play? I can't remember.
The Story of Dorian Gray.
Yeah, we went to one of them though. Anyway, he's fantastic. Did we was that in New York? We saw that? I think it was in New York or something. Anyway, the one, he's got this famous quote that I really like, and it's, consistency is the last refuge of the unimaginative.
Forgot that one.
So think about that for a second. Consistency is the last refuge of the unimaginative. I think, so I've got 2 glasses here. I've got a cup of coffee that's black, and I've got a glass of water that's completely clear. This cup of coffee represents all the knowledge I have about my wife, our relationship. It's filled with all the whys, why she's this way, why I'm this way, why our relationship is this way. We fill it with all this garbage data, hypotheses, because that's all they really are, arguments in our mind as to why the world works the way it does. And if I fill that liquid with so much tar and stickiness, maybe I put a bunch of cream and a bunch of sugar, it's so far removed from water that I need to strip away, in the same way that you would filter that cup of coffee. I need to strip it away and get it down to that clear liquid. Why is that important? Is because all these preconceived notions that I have about my wife and our relationship that are all tied to that why question. This is why other therapists are robbing you of your time and robbing you of, hope and optimism, because they're still trying to ask you why did you feel that way? What did it do for you? You're basically polluting that water with unreliable data. And why this is super important is because it robs you of consistency to be curious for your partner. And I think that's what Oscar Wilde was saying in that quote, is because when you reach a point of complacency and familiarity about your partner, and that this is the way our relationship is, you've lost curiosity for them, and now you've lost your imagination. Well, relationships don't grow if there's no imagination and excitement and joy and fun in them, right? Which is why I love that quote. And so going back to some of that language of it's either this or that, it's either her way or my way, it's either X or it's Y, it's so unimaginative. It's so familiar. It's so not asking questions about what's important to her, her hopes, her dreams, what my hopes, my dreams are. We're not painting on a blank canvas. It's like we're trying to touch up a painting that we've tried to paint over and over again, and pretty soon we just got to paint it black because we can't do anything with it, right? So we need to be stripping away the layers, stripping away what we think we know, about ourselves and our partner and get back and put that cup of coffee through that water filter, get it to be clear liquid. It's kind of like, they have those YouTubes where they'll take like toilet water and they'll run it through a filter and people will be drinking out the water from the other end. It's the same thing. We got to remove all that out of our mind about our partner. And one of the ways that we do that is we move away from this idea of this binary world that we live in. It's either this or that. And we move towards an and both. You can get your dreams, your hopes, and your values can be just as important. And we both can, and I can get mine at the same time. So we can move away from either or towards and both. And that's a big language shift. Because then if we talk about and both, then, going back to what we spoke about, I think it was in week 1, we don't need the word needs anymore. The only reason why someone would say, I need this from you, which makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck very quickly, is because it's a power struggle. The word needs is really just, it's like you're kicking off a power struggle. It's like you've blown the whistle and now you're playing a game of power struggle. Whereas if it's already understood that you can get what you want and I can get what I want, we don't need to use the word needs. That's the and both. And that's the and both that we want to move towards in our relationship. Another really important language shift that we're making is this rather instead. So when I ask couples, can you tell me about your relationship and make sense of it for me, describe it to me, all they're going to do is they're going to give me a laundry list of the things they don't like about their relationship. I don't feel heard. I don't feel listened. She doesn't support me here. We don't have sex there. They will describe their relationship in the absence of what they're not getting that they want, or in the presence of the pain that they're experiencing that they don't want. But rarely couples go back to that week 1 and start talking about the presence of the joy, the things that they really like about their relationship. It's kind of like when you ask someone to draw a tree, and if they don't draw the roots, which are twice the size of the leaves, you can kind of understand that what supports the tree, what makes the tree stand up and be a tree are the roots in the ground, but they won't focus on that. They're just going to focus on the leaves and what they can see, but they don't really scratch the surface to really understand what's below the surface, which is more than just the pain and the things that we're not getting. It's all the joy, but people have a very difficult time giving you a full answer to that, which is why that question of what would you rather, how would you rather feel, what would you be doing instead? That little simple language shift, remember, put an elastic band on your wrist that the next time your partner is complaining to you, and I'm not trying to denigrate someone. I use that term complaining to basically any type of feedback, positive, negative. It's probably somewhat wrapped up in a complaint. The next time your partner is coming to you with an issue, feedback, whatever it is, snap your wrist with that elastic band and remind yourself to ask them, what would you be doing instead? How would you rather feel instead? What other thing could I be doing if I wasn't doing the thing that hurt you? Or how would I have responded in a way that you wanted, right? So flip the script on them. This is the simplest thing to diffuse someone's complaints, is just to simply, when they give you a barrage of the things that they're upset about, the fastest way to diffuse that is to just simply ask them, what could I have done instead? Right? Now, a lot of people will say, well, yeah, you got to acknowledge them first. So yeah, you can throw that acknowledgement. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I said no to intimacy. I'm sorry I didn't text you when I was on my way home from work. I'm sorry I was short with you as I left the house. How should I have responded instead? Now, there's a really important thing about that, is that not only do you flip the script from the negative to the positive, but now you've future-oriented them. And now they're going to give you the answer to, they're going to give you the keys to the city, because they're now telling you what they wanted. And if you're a good listener and you could take notes, all you got to do is take notes and then pursue that thing that they wanted you to do instead, right? I would far rather have a North Star and know exactly where I need to go with reference to what my wife wants from me or from our relationship, than me trying to have to guess at it, right? So that important language shift of moving from either or to and both, or from, you know, complaint to response, where you're asking, what would you rather, what should I have done instead? These are just subtle language shifts that I want you guys to bring into your interactions with each other, right? And you're not fluffing someone off saying, I don't want to listen to your complaining or your upset feelings or whatever. And I'm not trying to fluff anyone off, but what I'm saying is that if you just tell me what you don't want or what I did that hurt you, I have no idea how to make it better. I have no idea to show up in a way that you need me or want me to show up. Right. And I just use that word need for your benefit. But it, you know, in my relationship, we don't talk about needs, but I've gone on that too much in week one. But anyway, it's really important to ask your partner for what they want and to have them give you that description. And so for me, it's that kickoff of monitoring that language. So if you put that elastic band on your wrist and you could snap it to remind yourself in those moments when your partner's coming to you upset, hurt, whatever, that's your cue to remember, how do I ask them for what they want in a way that's going to give me that North Star? So does all that make sense to you guys, those subtle language shifts? They are wildly effective. I cannot tell you how many fights can be diffused. I even see, do you ever open up X or Twitter? And that platform is so bad now because all it does is show me massive people fighting in restaurants. Like, I don't know what it is, but I open it up and it's like some stupid video of someone freaking out at the cashier or something like that. And in every single one of these videos that I see, the thought that goes through my head is no one asked the person for what they truly wanted. And that to me is an example of, you know, it's someone's crashing out and going crazy and trashing the restaurant. But what basically I see happen in those interactions is the customer's comes up to the cashier and says, you didn't give me this, or, you know, this is cold, or my order's wrong, or whatever like that. And immediately the cashier behind the cash register gets defensive. No one asks the client or the customer, what is it that you want? And that would have been the fastest way for me in my mind to diffuse that so that they didn't end up trashing the restaurant, is to just simply go, obviously acknowledge the, you know, the misstep, what you did wrong, but move into that question of, if I had done this correctly, or if this had a different ending, what would happen? Can you tell me what would I've done instead? And it's just such a simple way to get someone's input, because they're going to give you the keys to the city. They're going to tell you exactly what they want. So,
That's what two have been found it challenging.
yeah, for the people that found week 2 challenging, did you guys have anything in particular other than the time, or was there anything that you guys noticed in week 2 that they had questions about follow-ups? I know I asked you guys to make your kind of your fantasy name, like my wife and I called our conflict Friday Night Fights. Did any of you guys come up with any interesting names? I'd love to hear them. Either raise your hand or just turn your mic on or type it in the chat. What did you guys come up with?
Dinner time distractions. Roosters versus vampires.
Anything?
Can you not hear me?
Yeah.
I want to hear from Rachel.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, I know.
Can you hear me? Hello?
I mean, if you guys are too shy and you don't want to say, then that's okay too. But
Can you hear us or no?
but as long as you did the exercise, that to me is the most important. That there was that. And using that, did any of you guys have an opportunity to use that funny, that, you know, that name that fantasy name that you guys gave your avatar of your conflict? Oh, rooster versus vampires. I love that. I love that. Rival ambushes. That's perfect. That's how my wife and I get it often too. Like, one of us will come back and we'll have a fight. Yeah, dinner time's really bad. Another really difficult, we need a name for the interaction, like right before bedtime, when I'm really craving time with my wife, but then the kids end up turning the 45-minute bedtime routine into an hour and a half, and it starts getting on my nerves. That's all. So we need one for that too, but
That,
yeah. So, amazing. Well, I'm really glad that you guys did that. I love some of those names. Those are really great. It's really just meant to poke fun at yourselves and to laugh at the ridiculousness of all of our negative interactions, right? So,
there is a question that you can email it to the top of the document.
oh, okay. Well, is it relevant to this, or do you want to do it later?
It can come later.
Okay. Yeah, so then in terms of this week, so we covered that subtle language shift. I've already talked to you guys about needs. I've already talked to you guys about rather, instead, and the and both. Now I want to really move into that scaling exercise. Now, just a show of hands, how many of you guys did that scaling exercise on a scale of 1 to 10? Where do you see your relationship? Some of you guys did it, right? Okay, well then let me give you guys we'll do a brief overview, and then we'll go back and we'll just make sure that we covered those 3 questions. And then how you can dumb them down. Marcel, thank you, that's great. How you can dumb those questions down so that you can use them in the moment. So first of all, that scale of 1 to 10. So on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you've got your ideal relationship, 1 being you've got the opposite end. Why do I have you guys do this exercise? First of all, a lot of us think in numbers. Numbers are really easy. We can look at our bank account. We can look at, how many likes something has on Instagram. We all like numbers. Numbers are really easy for us to make sense in our head. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, if my wife and I are an 8, for example, why that's important is because if I say, sweetheart, where are you this week? And she says, I'm an 8. I know we both have a shared language. I know exactly what she's talking about. We know instantaneously that we're both referring to where we are in our overall relationship satisfaction. Now, that scale of 1 to 10, 10 can be, what is your ideal relationship? That's a 10. 1 is on the other end of the spectrum. That's a general overarching way to address an entire relationship or to scale an entire relationship. You could also make this just about your anger or your intimacy or your conflict, whereas on a scale of 1 to 10, where's our ability to repair? Oh, that's a 10. Our, 1 would be the other end of the spectrum. So what that scale represents is entirely up to you guys. But what I do encourage you guys to do is to get on the same page and decide together, what do we want the scale to look like? Right? So for a lot of couples, it is just like, where is our overall relationship on a scale of 1 to 10? Other couples, it may just be intimacy. Other couples, it may be with conflict repair, whatever it is. But the idea is that you guys have a shared language. Now, why is it important that you guys have a shared language? Well, I know when you guys are both speaking the same language and you're referencing your relationship, and you can both say that now we're talking about the number we're giving our relationship, I'm getting you guys to speak each other's language. You're building shared meaning. The same way I asked you to build shared meaning around that name that you're going to give your silly fights or the silly interactions that you guys want to get rid of. The more you guys speak the same language, the closer you're going to be, right? Now, I once dated a woman. She was a surgeon at the Mayo Clinic. And I was asking her about her studies in her field, and she was in medicine. And I was like, what is medicine? And she said, medicine is really just learning a language. It's what they study. They literally they learn basically a brand new language, probably a ton of Latin terms and a ton of other scientific terms, but it's like they probably add 5,000 words to their vocabulary over and above what the average person speaks, right? And now you get two doctors in the same room together and they could speak probably in that Latin language and understand each other. Well, there's a camaraderie in that, a feeling of being on the same team because you guys are talking about the same thing, right? So if I've given you guys now another area, where are you on the scale? Now you guys are talking about the same thing. And so you're measuring the same thing. You're measuring what I want you to measure, which is the growth and the progress in your relationship, right? So as you guys are doing this together, you're getting closer and closer and closer because you're speaking each other's language. It's a common language, right? And so on that scale of 1 to 10, and I'm going to ask you guys, where do you guys put yourself on the scale of 1 to 10 in terms of your overall relationship satisfaction? Now, let's just pick an arbitrary number of 6. Like, let's say Suzanne and Mike are at a 6. So they've now she can be a 6, he can be a 5. It really doesn't matter. If one of you guys is a 5, the other is a 6, what I typically do is I average it out. I say, okay, great. Now averaged out, you guys are a 5.5, right? So now what I get them to do is I get them to adopt a shared identity of where they are on that scale. So she's not a 6 anymore and he's not a 5. Now they're both a 5.5, right? And so now they both have this common language of how they're grading themselves, not in a pass or fail way, but in a monitoring their progress way. But now they've also have the same number. So they feel like they're in the same boat. They can say our relationship is here, right? Which is what I want them to do. Now that we've got that shared language and that shared number of where they are at in their relationship, there's 3 questions that come up that will basically serve to either support the reason why they're at a 5.5, support how they got there, or help them make sense of how they got there. But also the questions are meant to give them that North Star about how they would go from a 5.5 to a 6, to a 7, to an 8, to a 9, to a 10, right? And those are those 3 questions that are past oriented, present oriented, and future oriented. Now, again, I could literally just work with a couple with these 3 sets of questions. What have you been doing so well that made you a 5.5? That would be your past oriented. The present oriented question is, if you were to, grow to a 6, what would be some of the things you could do today that would move you up that scale? And then that future oriented question is, let's suppose you were a 6 or a 7. And here, because I'm asking, let's suppose you're a 6 or a 7, I'm asking them to future orient themselves into that place they want to be. So now I'm accessing their imagination. Let's suppose you were a 6 or a 7. What would you have done to get there? Right? So again, the only thing that we're asking about is, what have you done so well that kept you a 5.5 as opposed to a 4.5 or a 3.5? How would you go from a 5.5 to a 6.5? Or if you were an 8, what did you do to get yourselves there? Now, these are all the questions. They're all resource-based questions. They're all mining your story like an excavator for the nuggets of what you guys do well. It's always about what you do well. If there's anything that we can take away from today, what you guys don't do well as a couple is not even remotely interesting to you at all. And it's kind of like what you choose to define your relationship by. Do you define it by all the things that you can see that you don't like, or you define it by the things that you struggle to see, but that are amazing and bring you joy in your relationship, right? So those three sets of questions, the past oriented, how did we get here? The present, how could we move on? And then that third question is, if we'd moved on, what would we have done to move on? All of them are meant to just extract and to dig out and to uncover the things that you guys do well as a couple. And if I wanted to improve my relationship, I would not sit with any therapist that wanted to ask me and my wife about what we don't do well. Because all that's going to do is connect you to your pain. And the issue with that is that when you're in deep emotional pain, whether that's lack of intimacy, physical, lack of affection, emotional disconnection. I just did a post on it today on Instagram, which is going crazy viral right now, on a silent divorce. Let's suppose you're in a silent divorce. If you're in any kind of emotional pain with your spouse, there should be months of not talking about the pain and asking, what do we do well in our marriage? Because if you're in such emotional pain, you're struggling so hard to see how you guys are good. And I promise you, if I were to transplant one of you and put you out for lunch with a coffee and a friend and having a chat, and I were to just eavesdrop on your conversation as you described your marriage, if someone's in deep emotional pain, I promise you they are not going to be talking about the good things about their relationship to their friend when they're out for coffee. They're going to be pouring out their heart about all the things that aren't working. And your friend will love listening too, because it's trauma porn. It's people are addicted to drama, trauma, and I call it trauma porn. And I see it with therapists, I see it with coaches. They love to hear bad things happen to other people. And so your friends will happily oblige you to listen to all your complaining and complaints and all the things you don't like about your relationship and your husband, your wife, all of it. People will love to listen to that stuff. And it shocks Meredith, my wife, that I'm not even remotely interested. I once worked with a couple that had some type of trust issue. They'd been together 35 years. And they had some trust issue happen to them that devastated their trust. I still have no idea what it was. I don't know who it was. I don't know if she ruined the trust or he ruined. I have no idea. I didn't even ask. I didn't need to ask. Because the lack of trust and the conversation about the lack of trust is not helping them build trust. We need to go back to those questions. If on a scale of 1 to 10, and you're currently a 2 out of a 10 when it comes to trust, and you want to be a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10, let's get back to those 3 questions. What have you done so well that got you to a 2 instead of a 1? That's your past oriented. What could you do that would move you from a 2 to a 3? Or let's suppose you were a 5. What would you have done that got you to a 5? They're all just very different ways of asking the same question. How could we move up that scale? But I don't need to know what took their trust from a 10 down to a 2 in order to help them move back up the scale. Now, my wife always complains. She's like, Jonathan, it's not good for keeping clients because you're like done in 5 weeks. Other therapists have clients for 50 weeks. I'm like, don't worry about it. We don't need clients for 50 weeks. We need them for 5 weeks to do better, and then they'll refer their friends, right? Help people and you'll get clients and you don't have to worry about it, right? But the idea is you've got to suspend this belief of I need to massage and understand the pain more in order to get what I want. You actually don't have to do that. You can jump right into what it is you want, how will you get what you want, and what difference will it make in your life when you get it. Which is why week 3 and that scale is so tied to week 1, because let's say I don't want the silent divorce. I'm in a silent divorce. Well, go back to the first question in week 3 is, well, if you didn't have a silent divorce, what would you have instead? And then people will stop talking and they'll be like, okay, well, you know what a silent divorce is, and you could tell me all about a silent divorce. First of all, what's the opposite of silent divorce? I don't know if you guys are familiar with silent divorce. Silent divorce is just like another word for roommates, right? Can you guys give me words that would be the opposite of silent divorce? Anyone? You could type it in the chat. Can you, sweetheart? What would be the opposite of silent divorce?
Like connected partnership.
Yeah, connected partnership, fulfilled marriage.
Loud companion, best friend, lovers.
Right. So what, like,
They're coming.
We have all these names that are on the tip of our tongues for all the things we don't like, but ask people to give you the opposite, they struggle with it, right? So, so first of all, we got to identify what we want, which is if I don't want the silent divorce, I want the connected marriage, right? So let's call it the connected marriage. Or, you know what, we'll even borrow my branding, the chosen and cherished marriage, right? That's what we all want, right? So now if we want that, we need to build the description of what that looks like. We can't describe that in the absence of your pain. The only issue, though, is that if you just talk about the pain and talk about the things that you don't want, you're going to only fill yourself with people and surround yourself with people that affirm you in that pain until you meet me, where I'm asking you, okay, well, I'm not going to pay attention to your pain. I know you have it, but I don't need to understand why you had it. It's like the ER doctor. Do they care how someone got injured? No, they need to stem the bleeding and stitch the person back up, and then they can ask the questions and give it to the investigators to figure out why the trampoline broke. But why the trampoline broke and why they got injured is far less important than putting someone's leg back together, right? You gotta do the repair and get the person walking again, and before you start asking questions about why the injury happened in the first place. Right? So we got to get people out of the ER room and back into rehab. That's what we need to do. So now when you get to that place of, I don't want the silent divorce, but I want the chosen and cherished marriage. So now we've got to build the description of what that looks like. And that's where those 3 questions from today come into play, because now you've said, okay, if a chosen and cherished marriage was a 9, what would be happening in that moment when you guys were a 9? How would you guys wake up in the day? And this is kind of spilling into week 4, which I'll be setting you guys up for next week. But when you guys are a 9, build me a rich description of life, like what life is going to look like when you're a 9. See, the thing is, people will easily give you a description and a giant wash list of what life is like at a 2, but they'll have a very difficult time describing what life in a marriage is like at a 9. Right? So people really, we're so wired and oriented for the risks and the threats and the pain. It's all we see. It's the first place we go. We don't see that husband, that friend, that brother who's, on that street in that big inner city overdosing on fentanyl. We just see a drug addict. Like, that's what people choose to see. But they don't see this wonderful person that has their own struggles, right? So, we've got to reorient our brain away from just eliminating that pain, the thing that we don't want, and we need to turn it towards what are those things that'll be happening when we are a 9. So those 3 questions: how did we get to a 5 or a 6, wherever you guys are? And that how is, I'm going to ask you what you guys did that keeps you there, right? The second question being, if we were to go from a 5 to a 6 or a 5.5 to a 6.5, what could we do? So that's accessing your creativity. It's getting you guys to think creatively, like come up with some ideas. And then that third question is, imagine we are that 7, that 8, that 9. What would we have done to get there? All of these questions open up your creative higher faculties. And all of them are positive. All these questions you should be able to have these conversations with your partner without any anger, frustration, acrimony, anything like that. It should be very easy, because we're not talking about the pain. We're not talking about the things we don't want. We're not talking about how we hurt each other. We're simply just talking about more really of what we want. Right? So, did all that make sense for you guys? Perfect. Any questions that came in?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Desiree saying she tries to do the positive talking and future looking, so.
Yeah, does anyone so someone said they tried to do the positive talking. What happens if you try to speak and ask your partner these questions and they shut you down? They don't want to have the conversation. Was that kind of what you were going through when you tried to have the conversation and it didn't, they kind of slammed the door, they shut down? I'm assuming.
He's writing. But how do you deal with that if you're bringing all this new stuff to the table and your partner's not responding? Any advice on that?
Yeah, well, there was another person that had sent me an email or a DM on Instagram, and they said, I tried having these what do you want conversations with my wife, and she said, this is overwhelming. And she basically had to shut him down and said, I can't continue the program right now. I need to pause. So if someone, you guys, I'm going to teach you guys my clinical skills here as a psychotherapist, as a marriage and family therapist. When you run into someone that can't have a positive conversation about what they want, that is your first clue right there that they are flooded with pain and hurt. Right? So if someone can't talk about what they want to put on their pizza, it means they're still not over the fact that they're still super hungry. And they can't even, they're like hangry. They can't even decide what they want to eat. Right? There's too many physical symptoms going on. So if that's the case, you got to go real slow with that person. Now, if that even needs to, if you need to back the truck up and ask them for permission to even talk about what they want, then you have to do that. You got to go really slow. If you go too quickly, and it's kind of my approach is, let's run towards the thing that we want. But I'm also constantly having to be aware that if I try to move too quickly and someone's not there, I'll lose them. And so you got to go really slow, because that it means that their pain, their hurt, their sadness, whatever it is, it needs a place to go. And so typically my first session with couples is we'll spend 45 minutes to an hour just listening to their story. But this is the mistake so many people make, is that when all that flood of negative emotion comes out, a lot of people react to that really too quickly. And they feel like they're getting in the way of a moving train and they can't go left or right. They're like tied to the train tracks, and they're just going to get run over by all this negative stuff that their partner has to say to them. What I ask you guys to do is really just hold your tongue in that moment and know that this negative energy has got to go somewhere. It's got to come out. Before you can fill a cup with water, you got to pour out the black, polluted coffee, right? So give them space to let out what they need to let out, and remind yourself. And if you got to put another second elastic band on your wrist and snap it so that you don't get defensive, remind yourself that this hurt, this anger that my partner is experiencing is natural. It's going to come out. It's going to come out at me. It's going to be directed at me. I've got to sit here, and maybe that's not just for this 10-minute conversation. This may be for the next month. And very often I'll work with couples where, and it goes both ways. It could be the woman and it could be the man. I worked with a couple in Costa Rica and then another couple in Hawaii where both the husbands had totally said, I'm done in this marriage. And in therapy, she was the one that was, their wives were the ones that were getting the blunt and the brunt of the flood of negative emotion, which is very different than a lot of couples that I see. A lot of couples come to my practice and it's fix him and we'll be great. I would say about 80% of the couples I have are men and women coming in and saying, he's the problem, fix him and everything will be great. And the other 20%, it's the other way around. But it doesn't matter who comes in first with that fix my partner and we'll be great. I know wholeheartedly that if a woman's coming in saying, fix my husband, we'll be great. I know wholeheartedly she's screwing up too. But I can't tell her she's doing that. And vice versa with that guy in Costa Rica and that guy in Hawaii. One of them was cheating on his wife and he couldn't even apologize. He didn't even give a shit that he was doing that. He's like, you hurt me for 10 years so much. Now that I'm developing this emotional relationship with a colleague, I don't even care what you think. I'm so done with you. Right? He couldn't even apologize for initiating an emotional affair with someone else while he was still married. That's crazy, isn't it? Well, it's not crazy because there's so much pain there that's got to come out. And so what I say to those couples is you may have to sit through a week, 2, 3, it could be 2 months, but you may have to sit through and be patient while that negative energy comes out of your spouse and it gives them an off ramp so that they can let it out. And then it'll be your turn. But you got to be patient, right? So in those moments when your partner can't have a conversation about what toppings they want to put on their pizza, then you've got to pause and say, okay, tell me about what your hunger pains are doing to you. Right? Fill me in. If I need to sit here for a while, whether it's today, whether it's for a week, whether it's for a month, your pain has got to go somewhere. It needs an off ramp. Right? I'm going to snap that elastic on my wrist to not get defensive. I'm going to remind myself to not jump to solution mode. I'm going to remind myself to just sit here as long as you're willing to give me the opportunity after this stuff has come out that we can then flip the script and start looking at how we rebuild, right? I'm not asking you to be a dumping ground forever. I had another couple that I worked with in Utah where he was deathly afraid to say sorry because it felt like if he'd said sorry, somehow the hits were going to keep coming. And now he would be basically admitting to all the wrongdoing in their marriage. And so she would complain and be angry and upset and frustrated. And he would constantly push back and he would never say sorry because he didn't want to own all of the pain in their marriage. But what I had to tell him is that you need, until you say sorry for your role and how you hurt her, you're never giving her the opportunity to turn the lens on herself because she's still focused on seeing you as the pain point, right? But what always happens is when you come with an authentic apology, I'm sorry, I own my part, you will always see the other person say, oh, you know what? I also contributed here. When someone gets a true, authentic, real apology, they always will accept that apology and then they'll look at how they contributed to the problem. But if they don't get that apology, they will never be able to look at their own role. Right?
There's some good comments in the chat, guys, when you get.
Oh yeah, what's someone saying?
Back up, there's a couple of these. Yes.
Do you want to read it? Because I'm having a hard time following where it is.
Sure. So John says that I shut myself down with talking positive. So you need to ask about that. And
yeah.
Chris said, do you have any ideas for how to frame what you want that won't be triggering? I struggle to visualize what I want if a wall is standing.
Yeah. Okay. What's the first one?
Yeah, maybe he can explain it.
No, but just read it to me again.
It's more that I shut myself down with talking positive.
Okay, let me address that one. Someone's saying, speaking in that positive way, and it kind of ties into the second one too, shutting yourself down when talking about the positive. Okay, so this is a childhood wound that I hear, and it goes back to grade 1. Okay, when we were in grade 1 as children, none of us were pessimistic. When you were grade 1, unless you're my daughter, by the way, who wants to homeschool, and it's because she's so attached to her amazing mom. When you're in grade 1, all you want to do is get off the bus and run into that classroom as fast as you can to see the other kids. Right? So there's no ounce of pessimism in a 5-year-old until us adults beat it out of them. The optimism, I mean. So if you struggle internally to see what you want, somewhere, somehow you got the false belief that you don't deserve or you're not capable of getting what you want. Now we go back to number 1 because week 1, because I'm telling you guys to build a culture in your relationship, in your home, in which everyone is, to want is divine. Everyone is meant to ask for what they want, knowing that their partner replies with, how can I help you get what you want? Now, and I know a lot of us are parents, and maybe some of us are grandparents. When you think of inviting people into your home, right? And you have your children in your home and guests in your home, I imagine a home in which people aren't sheepish and shy. And I was listening to a podcast yesterday, actually 2 days ago, coming home from my walk, where a woman was describing guests when they come into their home, they get served once. And then after that, it's up to them to go to the fridge because she's not going to the fridge for them, right? They can get what they want in her home. And so imagine you built that culture in your relationship and in your home where everyone feels safe to ask for what they want, ask for what they desire. Well, you would only ask if you believed that you deserved it. And you would only ask for what you want if you believe that you are capable of getting what you want. And so if you struggle expressing what your deep wants and deep desires are, that to me, that's coming from a place of fear that either you can't get what you want or you don't deserve what you want. And so then if we can't automatically jump to that, then what I want you to go to your partner is say, how can we build a culture where we don't have to be afraid to ask for our hopes and dreams, and where we can come to each other and say, I want to be there to support you in getting you your hopes and dreams fulfilled, and vice versa. Right? That's where I would go if I struggled with expressing what I deeply want, deeply desire. Recognize that the cork in the bottle is fear, and fear stopping you from asking for what you want. Right? And you said there was one more question?
Well, at the very, Marcel mentioned stonewalling as you were talking about,
yeah,
letting someone sort of share their pain a lot, but,
now who was stonewalling? The stonewalling, was that the person on the receiving end of kind of that negative energy, or is that the person not feeling like you can ask for what you want? Because stonewalling is another really important one. Stonewalling is just a self-protection mechanism. And actually, I'm really, Marcel, really amazing that you asked this. Week 3, we talked about behavior versus identity, if you guys remember that, and it's in the homework. Why does someone stonewall? Is because they have a fragile view of their identity in their own mind. And worse, they believe that the view that their partner holds for them of their identity is not a good one. When you feel confident as a mature man or woman, you can make mistakes, apologize for the mistakes, knowing that you'll still be loved because you made the mistake, but the problem is you just screwed up. It was something that you said or did. It was your behavior. It wasn't who you are, right? So that's where the stonewalling comes from. Stonewalling, fight or flight, freeze, yelling, all of that. All of that is self-protection coping strategies that are meant to preserve your self-identity. The defensiveness is another really big one, which stonewalling is basically another word for that. Someone is so afraid that their identity is being attacked that they show up with swords and shields to defend themselves. And that's essentially what stonewalling is, right? So what you want to do in that instance is you want to go to the person again, fear. Remember that other question that I just answered, fear that I'm not going to be seen as a good man or good woman, right? Go to your partner and say, let's take fear and kick it out of our marriage, kick it out of our relationship. So you don't have to be afraid that I'm not going to love you or I'm going to turn off my love because you left something burning on the stove or you burnt my toast or something like that, right? It's okay for you to screw up in this relationship. You are still going to be loved unconditionally for who you are, right? Which is why there's a nuance between loving someone and liking someone. I actually think the more important thing to say to your spouse is, I like you, not I love you. Because if you say, I love you, that's something that you're doing. That's your behavior. When you say to someone, I like you, you're talking about who they are as a person. And I would say most men want to know that they're a good man. Most women want to know that they're really essentially a chosen, perfect, amazing, special woman.
So Desiree is asking, what if the screw up is more serious or betrays trust?
So if the screw up is more serious or betrays trust, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you. Everyone's going to have a line in the sand in terms of where trust is broken to the point where you can forgive someone, but it doesn't mean you want to continue a relationship with them. So that's a personal judgment. I don't know, like if there was infidelity in my marriage, I don't know that our marriage would survive. I would need like major therapy to even consider that. But how do people, so you have to define what your line in the sand is when it comes to any type of betrayal like that. Now, if for you it's not a nuclear button, but it is something that you can find forgiveness, I do believe that I could forgive my wife for cheating on me. I don't know that I would maintain a relationship with her afterwards. But if you can find you find that line in the sand, what's important to you, and you say, yes, this is forgivable, and it's something that I want to, and I'm willing to stay in this relationship with you, despite this betrayal of trust. I think what happens is that forgiveness piece is not an invitation to re-injure me again. It's a forgiveness that I'm willing to forgive this betrayal, but I just don't think that this type of betrayal can happen again and again. Like, I don't know, I don't know that there's going to be much appetite to continue. But there's a really important component, because if you decide to stay in the relationship, but you don't present that forgiveness to the person and you don't offer that forgiveness, I also don't know a relationship survives, mostly because the person that had hurt the other, the person that did the hurting, they need to still be seen as a whole person in their mind and by the people that love them.
Desiree says, I want to move past it very much.
Yeah.
She actually made a really good comment a bit earlier that she separates his behavior from his identity.
Okay.
She tells him that.
Perfect. So we'll get to that. So we'll get to that second part, but I just wanted to wrap up this thing about the forgiveness has got to be there, because everyone's got to be made to be a whole person. You have to be doing the forgiving. They have to be a whole person that they're being forgiven for the hurt. Now, where do you go from that? Well, if we're now a whole person, now we can slip into talking about behavior. And we can start talking about what is the acceptable behavior, what's the unacceptable behavior that's going to keep me in this relationship. And I do think that something like a betrayal of trust is a question of maturity. I do think someone who has done the hurting has to look inside and be self-reflective and decide, is this how I want to show up in my relationship? Is this the message that I'm sending my partner? Because I don't think a relationship survives if you can't be self-reflective. You can always tell a person's level of self-awareness through their behavior. And so if their behavior persists, it tells you their level of self-awareness. and you should see improvement in that behavior. So I think and short answer to that one question, I think forgiveness is the first step, but then I think that behavior has got to shift and it's got to change based on that person deciding, I want to leave that old behavior because it sends the opposite message that you're not chosen and cherished. And I'm going to adopt new behavior that sends you the message that you are chosen and cherished, that you are the only person that lives in my mind, that you are the only person I want to spend the rest of my life with, right? And that, again, that behavior, the things that we say and do send one of two messages. They send the message you're not chosen and cherished, or they send the message that you are. And I think every day that we need to be waking up, asking ourselves, how do we send the message that you're chosen and cherished?